Welcome to the She's Just Not That Into You podcast, where we're redefining female experiences and prioritizing female perspectives. I'm Rianne.
And I'm Ji-Yun. We are two friends with global background, sharing our multicultural experiences and discussing everything that sparks our passion.
Every week, we have honest, intimate conversations that we hope will inspire and empower not only each other, but women everywhere. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the She's Just Not That Into You podcast. I'm your host, Rianne.
And I'm Ji-Yun.
And today we're going to be talking about how to enjoy being single as a woman. So research shows that by 2030, 45% of women are predicted to be single.
Wow.
Yeah, and research shows consistently that single women are happier than married women, live longer, tend to be healthier, and also make more money. While the opposite is true for men.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for this is because in a lot of heterosexual relationships, women do the majority of unpaid labor, and women are the ones who are pouring all their energy into the relationship. And that's what makes the men live longer, healthier, happier lives. And the reason why so many women nowadays are single more than ever before is because nowadays women tend to be more financially independent, and there's also less kind of cultural pressure for women to get married than there was before. But I think the problem is that even though a lot of women obviously nowadays are financially independent, and even though we know that being single has a lot of benefits both to our health and also just our mental well-being and everything, a lot of the time in our current society, it's still seen as bad for a woman to be single, especially after a certain age. And it can be a really hard thing for you to do when a lot of people around you might consider this an unconventional lifestyle or something really radical.
Right.
And I think also the other problem is that in our society, we're still so kind of conditioned to living in a very heteronormative way, with everything centering on romantic couples, right?
Right.
And marriage and everything like
Yeah.
that. And because of that, a lot of people do find it hard to enjoy being single. There is still some kind of stigma attached to it. And, you know, even though nowadays more women are starting to understand that it's better to be single than be in a bad relationship, obviously a lot of the time people do get lonely when they're single and find it hard to build connection and build routine in their lives, and feel that they're getting left out of things because they don't have a plus one or stuff like that.
Yeah.
But, you know, this isn't really a reason why women should not enjoy being single. And there's a lot of things that you can do with your life to make sure that you're really getting the most out of it. And today we're going to be talking about those things.
Yeah.
So what do you think, June?
To enjoy being single, I think we first need to know why some people are uncomfortable being alone, or why they find it hard to do things alone or without any romantic partner or without any friends. Because without truly knowing why it's okay, it's really hard to enjoy spending time alone or doing solo activities without being in a romantic relationship. I mean, there's tons of reasons behind it, but I found it pretty interesting. There's also a lot of scientific reasons behind it as well. So, for example, I found it online that it's actually evolutionary psychology, because humans are wired for social connection, because we kind of evolved that way as social creatures. Like, we've always stuck together and done things in groups, right? Like a long time ago, being part of a group actually increased our chances of survival. Like, being alone meant being more vulnerable to predators and to the lack of resources, to danger in general. So naturally, I think we've become wired to seek connection to the things with other people rather than on our own. So it makes sense that we are more oriented toward shared experiences. And I think that's why it's a really good place to start, just by accepting that feeling awkward or embarrassed or even a little weird doing things alone, especially if you've never really done it before. It just is natural.
Yeah.
And obviously, like you already mentioned in the intro, we face a lot of cultural pressure and also social norms because we are conditioned to believe that some activities are better to be shared with romantic partners. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's seen as strange or even sad or lame or embarrassing to do things alone without any romantic partner. I think this also ties into this thing called the spotlight effect. It's a like cognitive bias when people believe other people are like paying more attention to them than they actually are. So when you're eating alone at a restaurant, like you feel that everyone is sort of looking at you and thinking that you are like awkward or like weird or something, but then nobody's actually paying attention to you. So in reality, most people are too focused on themselves to care if you're alone or not. But then when you're like watching movies alone or going to a cafe alone or I don't know, eating alone at a restaurant, you start to feel that everyone around you is sort of looking at you or judging you and stuff like that. And it's called the spotlight effect. And I think that sort of plays into this social pressure as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I think as a first step, it's really helpful to just recognize that there are so many things factoring into why we feel awkward or uncomfortable doing things alone, especially without a romantic partner. And so we can just start with simply accepting that it's okay to feel that way,
Hmm.
because honestly, everyone does at some point. We've been raised to think that way. We've been told that message over and over and over again. And maybe it's wired into us on some level, like it's in our DNA. So just knowing that and being kind to yourself about it is a really good place to start.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think yeah, one of the first steps to enjoy being single would be to make sure that you enjoy hanging out with yourself
Yeah.
and just know that anything that you're wanting to do with a partner, you can just do by yourself,
Mm-hmm.
whether that's traveling somewhere or going to see a film or going to watch a play or anything really. And remember that being lonely by yourself is better than being lonely in a bad relationship with someone you don't connect with.
Yeah.
Right? Because then, like, if you're in a bad relationship, I think that you're just as lonely or even more lonely as you are by yourself. But on
Mm-hmm.
top of all that, you've got this other person right next to you. Like, you want them to get out of the way, but they're there,
Yeah.
right?
So true.
It's like you're just as lonely, but with unwanted company.
And we also need to stop and think about whether it's actually social pressure or prejudice that makes us feel like doing things alone is lonely, or if it's something we've actually experienced ourselves. I think a lot of that comes from the way we've always been told that being single or doing things alone is sad or just, lame or not desirable. And because we've held it so much, we just kind of accept it as true, like, but then when you actually do become single and spend the time alone, like for an extended period of time, you start to realize that it's not really that bad. Like, you might even feel, I don't know, enjoyable. I mean, it might be for you at the end of the
Yeah, yeah.
day. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it all really is linked to what is seen as socially normal in your culture. Because, for example, when I was growing up in the UK and also when I used to live in France, I felt like it was quite weird to go and eat at a restaurant by myself. And I'm not sure if I ever did that. Actually, when I was living in Paris by myself, I did go a couple of times to the sushi restaurant near my house and I ate dinner there by myself and I felt really weird and self-conscious whenever I did.
Mm,
But then since I've been living in Tokyo for the past few years, it's just so normal here to eat by yourself.
yeah.
And like if you go into a restaurant, there are so many people eating by themselves and it's not something weird at all. So I just don't feel self-conscious when I'm in Japan eating by myself because there's just so many people around me doing that, right?
Yeah.
Which is maybe partly because obviously Japan has a really low marriage rate and a really low birth rate, and there are so many single people here. So maybe
Yeah.
part of the reason why. But yeah, it just really is so dictated by the culture around you and what is seen as
Yeah.
normal. And so, related to that, I would say that one of my other pieces of advice for how to enjoy being single would be to not live somewhere that makes you feel bad for being single
Yeah.
or makes you feel self conscious for being single. I think it would really be something worthwhile to consider moving to a different city or country if the society you're in makes you feel really oppressed as a single woman.
Mhm.
You know, like for example, if you live in the countryside where people tend to be a lot more traditional, consider moving to a vibrant city where people are more free to be independent and live their lives in an unconventional way without everyone caring what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
And I do also think that Western countries tend to be a lot more traditional when it comes to romantic relationships. And there's a lot more pressure for women to not be single.
Oh my god,
Um,
yeah.
Whereas in Asian countries, you know, as I just discussed in Japan, everyone goes to restaurants by themselves
Yeah.
and the marriage rate is falling a lot. So,
Right. And I feel like in Asia, there's definitely some pressure, like, I don't know, marriage pressure or like a dating pressure when you are in your 20s and 30s. But when
mhm.
you actually pass that phase, it's sort of like accepted. If you're single after that age, it's sort of accepted that, oh, that person is like enjoying like being single or something, right? But then
Mm.
in the Western countries, I think even when you're 40 or 50, it's still desirable that you have someone to date, right?
Yeah, yeah,
At least
yeah.
they still have feel pressure to find someone to date.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's a
Yeah,
huge
definitely.
difference.
Yeah, on that note, I would say that another important part of how to enjoy being single would be to try not to care too much about parents' expectations. Because, you know, the scientific research has said time and time again that women who live their lives for other people tend to have a lot of health problems,
Mm-hmm.
whereas women who live their lives in a way they want to tend to be healthier and live longer, happier lives.
Yeah.
And if you have family members who keep asking you why you're single and put pressure on you in that way, remember that it's none of their business
Yeah.
and it's your life. They're not the one who has to get married to someone they don't like, for example, right?
Right.
It's really nothing to do with them. So don't let that stress you out too much. And don't let that get in the way of you enjoying being single if that's what you want to do at this time in
Mm-hmm.
your life. And I would say another thing I was thinking about when it comes to how to enjoy being single would be to make sure that you actually take advantage of the fact that you're single by
Mm-hmm.
doing things that you wouldn't be able to do so easily if you were in a relationship, whether that's solo travel or, you know, going to live in a different country for a few months or just making time for hobbies that you really love or going to visit friends or, you know, going on trips with friends, because there are a lot of things that you don't have as much time and energy for when you're in a relationship
Mm-hmm.
that you can do when you're single. And it's so much better to take advantage of the time when you're single by really enjoying yourself by doing those things rather than kind of putting your whole life on pause just because you're single and waiting for a romantic partner to go on a trip together with, for example, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think I would say it this way, like romanticize your own single life. Like you don't have to wait for someone to share those beautiful experiences with, right? So why are you like waiting? Just start doing those beautiful like activities for yourself and creating those memories for yourself.
Yeah, go on that sunset cruise in Santorini by yourself, right?
Yeah, I would love that.
And also, being single can be a really good time for self reflection and really getting to know yourself,
Mm-hmm.
which is sometimes quite hard to do when you're kind of in a relationship and you're always with this other person whose energy you're absorbing. And like, I don't know, I just think it's just so much easier to focus on yourself and your own desires and goals and really get to know yourself when you're single than when you're in a
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think one way of really enjoying being single is by taking advantage of that and using that time by yourself to really get to know yourself on a deeper level.
And just remember, like, you have to ask yourself, do I actually not enjoy being alone because I've experienced that and truly didn't like it? Or do I just think I won't like it because it feels unfamiliar or uncomfortable? Like, I think there is a huge difference between something that genuinely doesn't work for you and something you've just never given a real chance. Like, sometimes we mistake that initial discomfort for a hard fact. Like, oh, this isn't just for me. This just doesn't work for me. This is not for me. Right. But sometimes it might just be that it's new. Like, you just haven't had the time or right experience or right chance to get used to it. So I think it's worth reflecting on whether your discomfort or whether your unwillingness comes from actual experience or from just a vague assumption. Because once you try it, like really try it, you might find that you're more okay with being alone than you ever expected. Or you might even like it, you know?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And also, I know that we've been talking a lot about how you have to enjoy doing stuff by yourself, but just because you're single doesn't mean that you have to be by yourself all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the time, people who really have a miserable time when they're single versus people who have fun when they're single, the difference is whether you have a good social network around you and whether you have friends and a community in your life. And like anything that you would do with a romantic partner, you can do it with friends.
Yeah.
So if you are really struggling with feeling lonely when you're single, then I would suggest trying to, join certain communities around hobbies that you have. You can also listen to our podcast episode about making friends as an adult.
Yeah.
There's really so many ways that you can meet new friends and make new community as an adult. And that, like even June, we met each other just a few years ago
Right.
online and we lived
Yeah.
in different countries.
And we've only met each other like 3 times.
In person, yeah.
Yeah, in person.
And now we have this podcast together. Like, it's just so
Yeah.
crazy what kind of things can happen. And I actually am pretty sure that I would never have met you if I wasn't single at the time.
So true.
Right? Because, like, if you're single, you have more time to, like, explore stuff like that, right?
Yeah. You don't put yourself out there and try to find a language partner, right?
Yeah, because I would have been so busy, like,
Exactly.
I don't know, like hanging out with my boyfriend's family or something,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like, I wouldn't have had the time to
Right.
meet a new friend online,
Mm-hmm.
which is, yeah, just
Mm-hmm.
so crazy. But yeah, just remember that even if you're single doesn't mean that you have to be alone all of the time. You can meet friends and
Yeah.
make a community in your life as well.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Speaking of which, I would also recommend surrounding yourself with other women who are single and enjoying themselves. Like, don't only surround yourself with women who are married and pregnant and talking about their partners all the time, because that probably will make you feel miserable,
Yeah.
or it will make you feel more self-conscious about the fact that you're not, doing the same things as they are, right?
Yeah.
And equally, don't surround yourself with women who are single but who are miserable about it, right?
Yes.
Or who are, always looking for someone. Surround yourself with women who are single and happy that way. Or even, hang out with male friends who are not feeling pressured that they need to be in a relationship right away. Like our mindset is really influenced by the people around us, and just surrounding yourself with people who have a different perspective can really change how you feel about your life and the situation you're in your life as well.
Yeah.
So, for example, the episode we did with Hein Shim about the
The
4B
4B.
movement in
Yeah.
Korea. The episode title is Why Some Women Are Boycotting Men. That was really eye opening for me, because through that episode where we interviewed her, I learned all about how a lot of women who've taken part in this Korean feminist movement called the 4B movement, where women are essentially giving up dating men and marrying men. She was basically saying that the best part of the movement was the community and the sisterhood between the other women
Yeah.
who are participating in the movement. And that really made me realize how much it can really change your perspective on everything based on who you surround yourself with. And also, I think since I've moved to Japan, especially in Tokyo, there are a lot of people my age who are single, which is actually not that common in the UK in terms of the friends that I was surrounded with. I think it's really changed the way I view certain timelines that people need to stick to, and the way that I used to think people should live their lives and everything like that.
Yeah, environment is really important. Just to share a bit of my own experience, I've been single for about 6 years now. And honestly, I find it kind of hard to give advice to other women about how to enjoy being single because for me, it just feels really natural. Like, I've always felt just as comfortable doing things on my own as I do with a romantic partner. Like, spending time with a partner can be great, but being single can just be as fun. Like sometimes it's even better. And what I've realized is that while a lot of people struggle with being alone or like enjoying being single, for me, it's never really felt difficult. I think the reason is that I've spent a lot of time talking to myself, like reflecting and really trying to understand who I am. Like I'm not even exaggerating when I say I put serious amount of time into that. Like if you added up all the hours I've spent on that, I think it could probably amount to a whole PhD. Like I think at the end of the day, it's not really about whether you're single or dating or married. It's just about whether you're comfortable with yourself and with where you are in life, like regardless of your relationship status. And I think in order to get to that place, you really do need to spend time with yourself. Like you need that space to not be so easily influenced by your environment or by other people's opinions.
Hmm.
Because once you start seeing your life as truly your own and you redefine it on your own terms, that's when you actually feel free. Like free to be just where you are without needing to explain yourself or worry about what other people think. So, yeah, I think it's really important to develop this kind of self awareness to really embrace your time as single.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that advice. I think that'll be really helpful for people listening. And I would say also that if you're not enjoying being single as a woman, and I would say also that if you're not enjoying being single, ask yourself what kind of problems you have in your life that you're hoping that being in a romantic relationship will solve for you, and
Mm,
work out how you can solve these problems from a different angle that doesn't depend on you being in a romantic relationship.
yeah.
I would say, try to find a different purpose in your life outside of finding a romantic relationship if you think that that is what's going to solve all of your problems. So maybe we can just give some examples here, but I don't know, what kind of problems do you think people tend to think will be solved when they're in a romantic relationship?
I actually have no idea. Like listening to you just said that, like I don't think any of my problem will be solved by romantic relationships, I think, right?
Yeah, but I think like a lot of people do think that
Do you think that
being in
way?
yeah, they do think that way, I guess, because like in fairy tales and Disney films we're taught that she got married and lived happily ever after, right? So
Yeah.
and every time it's always like the prince who's coming to save the princess, and then after that she's happy forever, right?
Yeah, that's so true. I think that's exactly why we need to shift our like POV on love and relationships. Like love shouldn't be a solution, you know? Love is love. It's not something we should use to fix or complete something else. But like somehow we've been taught to believe that we need to wait for someone to come along and complete our lives. But the truth is, they won't. They are not going to solve anything because no one can do that for us, right? We know that. And we can only truly love someone fully, meaningfully, and in a healthy way when we are able to do the same for ourselves first.
Yeah, I think if you're single and you're unhappy, when you're in a relationship you're just going to be unhappy but with company.
Yeah.
um,
So
um,
true.
or you're gonna be like unhappy with your own problems and then also someone else's problems.
Yeah. And I think we are all really biased to this idea that there's only one form of love. Like romantic
Yeah.
love isn't the only form of like meaningful relationship or meaningful love, right? It can also be like friendships. It's also another form of love. Like there's also self-love and I don't know, doing something like just connecting with the people like genuinely. That's also a different form of love, right?
Yeah, I think people who are struggling with this also need to give up on the idea of having to control your life or feeling like your life needs to be lived according to a certain timeline.
Yeah.
You just kind of need to detach from that by trusting that everything will work out in your favor. And you can't really control anything or how it happens.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to stop trying to control your life by thinking that you can solve your problems by being in a relationship, you know?
Yeah.
Because I guess that's something that's dependent on someone else. So you can try to control your life by, doing stuff that's going to make you happy and doing stuff that's going to solve the problems that you currently have that you're hoping that a relationship will fix.
Yeah.
But you can't control whether another person enters your life and wants to share it with you or not.
Right. The more we talk about this, the more I find it weird that people think that romantic relationship will solve their problems, right? I mean, what problems is it gonna solve? I think the only problem that it's gonna solve is the social stereotype that you're
Yeah.
weird or that you're lame, that you have some issues, personality issues or
Yeah.
something, right?
And well, I think some people, prefer to watch TV and go to restaurants and all those other things we mentioned with someone else.
Yeah. I feel like people would so much rather be that kind of person who's socially desirable than actually be true themselves, right? Like, my God, like people would rather be liked or accepted than be honest about who they really are. I think this just really shows how deeply important it is for us as humans to feel like we belong, like to be part of a community or part of society.
And I think the reason why people came to think this way is, well, partly it's because of evolutionary reasons. But
Mm-hmm.
I think the evolutionary reasons were more about you having to be part of like a pack, like a community, Whereas I
Yeah.
think the whole kind of heterosexual couple being at the center of everything is more of a kind of Western patriarchal system.
And that's a
Obviously,
Christianity.
yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's because heterosexual men benefit so much from being married or being in a relationship. So it's obviously going to be more convenient for our society to think that that's the best thing for everyone to do, right?
Mm.
Because I've actually heard on a lot of podcasts, especially on Dr. Chatterjee's podcast, that the kind of modern family unit where there's just a man and a woman and then their kids, and then like they're living quite far away from their relatives and their other friends and everything, that's actually a relatively new thing. And it actually really makes people unhappy because it's quite difficult to raise children without a community to rely on to help you
Yeah,
out with it.
yeah.
Like if you're just a man and a woman and you're both working and then you're looking after your kids, it's just like too much for two people to handle. So evolutionarily, it actually makes more sense for people to, be in a community than to be just the two of them in a romantic relationship, right? Yeah, I wonder why that all started. Maybe it was something to do with like the Industrial Revolution or something. People started to move away from their communities in search of jobs. It's because of capitalism.
But I feel like in Western societies in general, still the influence of Christianity is so prevalent.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
so many countries are so deeply rooted in these Christian values like marriage, family, and like this cultural expectation that a successful adult like should be married and have kids
Mm-hmm.
and have the desire of a family.
Yeah.
In that sense, I feel like in the West is even more judgmental toward people who remain single after a certain age,
Yeah, that's so true.
right?
And also, by the way, we're not saying that Christianity is bad. I mean, June is actually Catholic herself, and
Yeah.
She has a cross tattooed on
I,
her hand.
I'm born Catholic, yeah.
um, but I think it's more like the whole kind of cultural norms around it, right?
Yeah.
And oh, I would also add that another way to make sure that you're enjoying being single is to not use online dating apps.
Oh my, yeah.
Well, firstly, they'll probably add more stress to your life. And in a similar vein, don't look for random hookups or casual dates if you're doing these for validation or to try to make yourself feel better about being single.
Mm-hmm.
Because, yeah, I think that doing that kind of thing will really make you feel bad for being single. In our Pros of Being Single as Women podcast episode that we did as one of our first episodes, we actually talked all about dating apps
Yeah.
and our experiences with that.
I know that people start making some meaningful connections on dating apps as well. Like people find like lasting relationships and people get married through dating apps. But if you feel like you're gonna be emotionally unstable after using dating apps, then it might not be a good idea to try it.
Yeah, and like especially if you're approaching it from a place of using a dating app to meet people to make yourself feel better about being single or to make yourself feel more desirable or something, I feel like that's never going to work.
Like it's part of enjoying a single life.
Yeah, yeah, you won't be able to enjoy being single if you're
You're
doing
gonna
that.
just put yourself in so much more drama.
Yeah. Oh my god. So finally, I wanted to ask you, June, if you have any advice for any women who are listening who are already in a relationship or married and they're wondering, oh shit, does this mean that I'm gonna be really unhealthy and live shorter
It's
and
not,
have a
yeah,
regret
yeah.
for life? How can a woman like that still be in a relationship but keep the single mindset and enjoy their life as if they were single? Because a lot of the time women tend to lose themselves in relationships and pour all their time and energy into their partners and lose their identity
Yeah,
and their purpose and the things that they
so
love.
true.
And yeah, do you have any advice for how women can keep doing this despite being in a relationship? And by the way, I don't mean in terms of hooking up with random
Yeah,
guys.
yeah,
I don't mean
yeah.
enjoying being
Of
single in
course.
that way. I mean more like in terms of like self love and getting to know yourself and just really kind of understanding what makes you passionate and what gives you a purpose in life and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it's such a important but difficult question. Do you have any advice first about this to the people who are already in a relationship or married?
No, because I've never been in a relationship and not lost myself.
Oh my god. Oh my god. So funny. Oh my god.
I mean, I'm kind of joking, but because I think there are things that I try to do when I'm in a relationship. For example, I can still try to be independent, by having separate friends and having separate hobbies and having your own life plans and ambitions outside of the relationship and making sure that you make time for your friends and stuff.
Hmm.
But yeah, June, I don't know if
Yeah.
you have any better advice.
I think even if you're in a relationship or married, it's important to stop and actually take time to build a life that you love outside of your romantic relationship. For example, like you can design your ideal like daily life, like what kind of things that you want to do in the morning as your morning routine, or what kind of hobbies bring you the most joy and stuff like that, right? Because we are so easily focused on our time with our romantic partner. And if we are too focused in that, we start losing our own life out of it. So you actually need to take time to think about what kind of life you want to have outside of the relationship or when you're alone. Like, for example, even when I was dating and even when I was in a serious relationship, I traveled a lot solo. I also did an internship in Thailand, Bangkok, away from my romantic partner at the time, and we were doing a long distance for about 6 months, and that was possible because I prioritized my career and also potential financial independence. And in that way, I was able to maintain a strong sense of independence and my own freedom, even when I was in a really, really committed romantic relationship. So, yeah, I feel like having my own life and being in a relationship, they are not mutually exclusive. They are possible together as well. So, even if you're in a relationship or married already, you can still have that healthy, single, independent mindset if you take time to think about how you want to define your time outside of that relationship. Because usually toxic relationship or losing yourself happens when you don't think about that.
Okay, so what would you say to the people out there who are so far gone that, for example, when you said that you can think about how you can develop a morning routine that you like, or how you can find hobbies that you love to
Mm-hmm.
do at the weekend, what if they say, what do I do because my morning routine
Oh my
revolves around
god.
making my husband breakfast before he goes to work?
Oh
And
my
my at the weekend I have to look after his mom or something. I don't know.
Oh my god. I think my answer would be related to what we discussed in our previous episode about how we should not be investing in a man. Because to get out of that kind of routine, you first have to decide if that activity is your choice or by force, right? If you truly enjoy being that person doing everything for your partner, like I'm so happy making meals for my partner, or I'm so happy, like I feel so energized, I feel so like myself, like doing everything for my partner, then then you should be fine. But if you feel like you're forced, or if you feel like you are, I don't know, tired or losing yourself, then you should really reevaluate that kind of balance and relationship.
Yeah, because that is what makes women who are married and in relationships become unhealthy, right? When
Yeah,
they're not energized by doing things, but they feel like they
exactly.
have to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because, like, if you think about it, there are a lot of men who really love to cook as well, right? It's not just a feminine thing.
Right.
For example, my dad always did most of the cooking when I was growing up, and he really loved cooking. But the difference is that my dad never cooked when he didn't feel like it. Oh, he never felt like it was his duty to cook.
Yeah.
So like he really liked cooking, and he would always like cook for our family, but he did it because he enjoyed it. Whereas a lot of the time women who are the ones who are cooking for their family, they don't do it from enjoyment but because they feel like they have to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So true.
For example, if my dad was sick, he wouldn't cook. Or if
Yeah,
he
that's so
wasn't in
true.
the mood to eat, he wouldn't cook,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Whereas, like, my mum really hates cooking, but
Mm-hmm.
whenever she's the one cooking for her family, even if she's sick, she'll feel like she needs to cook. Or
Yeah.
even if she's not hungry, she feels like she needs to cook, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the difference, right?
Yeah.
It's not necessarily about, cooking being a female activity or anything. It's more about how women approach it versus how men approach it.
Yeah, whenever I see a family where the dad is the one who cooks, they always say things like, "Oh, my dad enjoys cooking, so that's why he's been, cooking for the family for 20 years or something, right?" But we never say that when the mom is the one who cooks, right? That's so sad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we always feel like we need to take care of somebody else. Otherwise, we are gonna like feel really sorry.
Yeah, we feel
Um,
guilty, yeah.
yeah, we feel guilty. Right, guys, I think that's about it for today. And we just wanted to share with you guys this message that being single isn't something to endure, it's something to embrace. It's a time for self discovery, it's a chance to build an enjoyable and fulfilling life. And yeah, it's a time to find yourself and define your own happiness. Thank you for listening. We'll see you guys in our next episode. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to our latest episode, and if you like that, please share with a friend.
We'd also really appreciate if you could rate and review our podcast. And please get in touch if you have any feedback.
We'll be back again with another episode next week.